line without any clear runway on it being funded from that date. And there's never been a political suggestion since that it should be. There is no history. I'm sad to say there's been no political push to put a budget to this body of work. AMUA came through in budget submissions and proposed that. But we all know we've had advocacy groups come through here through budget processes, and then often there's political swing in behind that, and politicians go, I want to see budget in behind that proposal from that advocacy group, that community group. And that's our job, that's how we do it. But that hasn't actually happened on this item. There has been no political swing in behind to ensure the budget was put into place to allow it to go on our forward work program. And I've just reminded you that for month after month, we sign off this work program, and I'm always open for suggestions or somebody pointing out that there's an absence of material. No one has ever pointed out to me that the Marina strategy is not on the forward work program. I have no history of that whatsoever. Though I was aware of it, but it needed to be subject. It can only go on the forward work program if it's actually supported by a budget. So there's a disconnect there, members. And it's gone through 2 annual plans and a 10-year plan. So it's a bit of a lesson here for us all, I guess. If you want something, you need to make sure you go to the Chair of Finance and work with the finance team to get it funded. A lot of the issues that AMUA highlighted at that time have actually been resolved, like the Hammerhead and like the West Park land issues. But we've also stated in resolution that there will be no sale of land, no alienation of council land by resolution without prior approval of this council. So there are additional steps that we have actually taken. But really the crux of the matter is it a priority? And it's not funded. If it was a priority, it would have been funded. If we try to make it a priority now, why did we not make it a priority through an LTP process, let alone 2 other annual plans that preceded it? A lot of those concerns from those groups have been negated by steps that we've already taken. I personally don't see any value in committing $500,000 to $1 million on this work. Possibly in the future, when we're more flush, Councillor Simpson, that might be the case. But in the immediate future, I am not hopeful of us seeing the financial resource come our way that is going to allow us to proceed with this. But even then, I do have questions about it. So my core question is this a priority, given the housing crisis, given the transport crisis, and given the climate crisis? Where do you want to land that scarce council dollar? Where do you want to put that public money to best purpose? And I would say it's not here. Mayor Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, a motion to defer most often succeeds. Why? Because it's the easy option. You don't have to make the decision. You avoid the decision. And I think that it might be the easiest option. I don't think it's the most honest option, and I don't think it has integrity. That's why I will not support a measure to defer. You can't have a resolution on the books and not act on it. We've had this on the books for 2 years now. We haven't done anything. So the real challenge to every one of us is we've got 2 choices. Either it is important to do this marine strategy, it is a priority, and put your hand up now to spend $1 million on it, or it's not a priority, it's not a great use of $1 million, and it's not going to be on the books. It shouldn't be on the books. There's 2 reasons why it shouldn't be on the books. One, Jacques went through that list. You know, nobody can argue with his list. Is climate change, is light rail, is the 3 waters strategy, is the national policy on urban development, are they the things that we need to spend our scarce and precious staff resource on? Everybody around this table would say yes, they are the priorities. The second thing is our financial situation, and I think Desley Simpson gave an honest answer. This isn't going to happen in 4 years. I think I'm not misrepresenting you in saying that, Desley. And if it's not going to happen in 4 years, for God's sake, take it off the books, stop raising the public expectation that we're going to do it, and stop looking incompetent because you move something and you don't act on it. So the challenge in front of us is, if it's a priority, vote the money now or at the first opportunity and do it. If it's not a priority, don't leave that expectation on the books, take it off the books. Now, I voted for this over 2 years ago, and I voted for it because I thought there were some really pressing issues that we needed to resolve. One was the question of whether we would sell marina land, and I'm not in favour of doing that, and that is now off the table. And if it were to come back on the table for any reason, we're the body that would make that decision. The second thing is the hammerhead was clearly a pressing issue, but we've resolved that. We've done that, we've done the right thing on it, we've purchased the lease back, and it will be there and preserved as public land. Those were the two issues why I thought a strategy was necessary. We dealt with both without the need for a strategy. And I do not believe that spending $1 million right now on a marine strategy is in any way a priority or would come ahead of all of the other things that our staff is doing. I'm really conscious that our staff are stretched to the limit. And, you know, partly it's because of what happened under COVID, partly it's because we're having staff swiped by other agencies. But I'm not prepared to say to our Chief of Strategy, actually, this is a priority, we're going to give you the money and you should put your other resources into it now. Because I think she's right. It isn't a priority and we don't have the resources to put in it. So stop creating the expectations around it. So my challenge to every one of you is don't take the easy option to defer. Either decide it's a priority and put your hand up to put the money into it, or decide it's not a priority, won't be now or in the foreseeable future. Take it off the books and stop making us looking like a fool of having resolutions that we never implement.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go now to Councillor Fletcher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what this debate has highlighted is that our staff are under incredible duress, and I think on that we all agree. There's been so much that central government have required us to do that was perhaps not anticipated. And the reason that I foreshadowed that I wanted an amendment was that we could actually have a really good respect for process and have some discussions around prioritisation, because there may be other things that Megan and staff might have to bring to us in the same way today to revoke, and she's nodding her head in support. And we don't know what we don't know. So I would like us to have good process. I would like elected members to take that responsibility on, as the Mayor has said. But we need to have that conversation about prioritisation and resourcing. So the amendment that I want to put is that the item be deferred until prioritisation and resourcing issues be resolved. The reason I would like to see that is that I don't want to see a breakdown in the relationship between elected members and staff. Staff are doing their level best within the resources that we have. But as I said, when we went through the CEO contract, it went through appointments, it then came to the governing body, there was no mention of the fact that we were going to be chopping things out. I'm all in favour if we have to prioritise and we have to take some things out, but let's have it in the context of the big picture rather than ad hocery. So I would encourage members that it would give us the opportunity today, if we defer the item until prioritisation and resourcing issues can be resolved, and we can sit down and have the conversation sensibly with officers. Thank you. It's moved by me, the amendment.
Okay, so we've now got an amendment.
I emailed it to Kalinda.
So I just need to be clear, Councillor Fletcher, it's an amendment by replacement.
It's an amendment by replacement. I emailed it through.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll now put that up, and that is now on the table. That is what we're now debating, just that amendment, members. And your second is?
My seconder was Greg Sayers.
Happy to Sayers, thank you. So that is the motion before us now, members. Now I've got a speaking list for the first motion. Shall I take that speaking list or shall I extinguish that speaking list?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and that's why I'm taking the speaking list for the debate on the amendment. So if you can just signal, Councillor Watson, you're on the next on the list, are you also free to speak on the amendment? I'll go to you now, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to correct a couple of matters before I begin, and one is to do with this notion of a bid for budget that's been bandied about a bit without spending too much time on.
Sorry, John, point of order. Sorry, I loathe to do this. My point of order is in regards to now questioning. Do we have an opportunity for questioning, as we always do with any item, before we get into the debate? And sorry, John, to do that, but I just needed to know because I've got a question that needs to be asked first before we get into the debate. That's why I'm seeking this point of order, because normally we would go into questions. So I just need that answered. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Filipaina. You now have questions not so much on the report and the motions that were there before. You are now seeing an amendment by replacement and you have a question related to that.
Yeah, so I'm really seeking, and that's why the point of order as to the process now around asking our staff based on the amendment that we've just now been put in front of us.
Just a minute, please. I'll just check. Thank you.
So I think we've established this as a practice prior, that once the questions on the motions or the recommendations which were on the table are exhausted, then the staff leave the table and they are not to be drawn into the debate. So I think the opportunity has passed for staff to be asked questions in relation to this motion on the table. However, there were several questions about potentially deferring this item, which the staff did answer previously. So I think at this point, the amendment's on the table and it's time for members to ask questions of each other and have the debate, but it's not for the staff to get involved at this point.
So we can ask questions of each other, meaning that I can ask questions on the amendment is what I'm asking for, of staff. Is that a yes or no? I'm actually waiting for the staff to answer it.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Filipaina. Not staff, because at this point it would be, they would have, be at risk of getting drawn into the debate and coming down on a side where it's at this point it's within your hands as a committee.
Councillor Filipaina, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have on it. And it's
Sorry, Councillor.
For that reason I foreshadowed while we had staff here that I would be moving this.
Thank you. So some councillors did discuss deferral in their questions earlier on, and I appreciate you have another question, but we have asked the staff to withdraw. We'll have to keep with that and proceed with the debate on the amendment only. So members, can I just stress that it is a one-line amendment by replacement and it's related to deferral. So it is a debate on a deferral. It's a lot narrower than the earlier discussion. Please, Councillor Watson.
Okay, I'm supporting this amendment put up by Councillor Fletcher to defer, and that the justification for that deferral is to do with that it would allow a good process or reasonable process to play out, and that goes to the report that's going to the Audit and Risk Committee later this month. I find it almost farcical that one arm of council has spent 18 months, and we talked about respect for staff. I don't know about what respect there is for the staff who have engaged in that 18-month investigation, who have detailed a series of very pertinent observations to do with the marina strategy, to do with issues that have arisen since 2019, so by no means have we got no problems. In fact, there's a whole host of other issues that have arisen in the intervening time. We have recommendations going to do with risk, to do with probity assurance, to do with unitary plan processes, but most importantly and most relevantly, to do with the need for a marina strategy. Now, I find it inconceivable, if we're talking about honesty and integrity, that a collection of councillors would vote, and would vote quite knowingly, without wanting to see this report. Why on earth would you do that for the sake of deferring a couple of weeks? I've made that point. I don't think I can make it any clearer. To me, that's just obvious. As far as honesty and integrity goes and respect for people, I would also draw your attention to the fact that there are other parties involved in this that have had no say. So one of the resolutions that's to be revoked is one to do with engaging with stakeholders, to do with mana whenua, and also latterly to do with local boards. They've had no opportunity to engage in this process whatsoever, and I would suggest quite deliberately so, and that's reflected in the timing of this. We've waited 2.5 years, yet after 2.5 years, we find out 2 or 3 days in advance that this massive change, which the people have attempted to downplay, is being proposed to revoke this these resolutions that were the consequence of a great deal of engagement and input from various people in the community around the time. And I would reflect some of the organisations that would have been here today if they'd had opportunity, and that's some of the very large boating, yachting fraternities from right round every part of Auckland, to do with local community members and also to do with local boards. So at the heart of this, Mr Chair, is the of the deferral amendment is the quite reasonable expectation that this be allowed to go to audit and risk on the 23rd of August. We have heard from the Chief of Strategy that no adverse consequences emerges from that, none whatsoever. How could there be? We've been waiting 2.5 years for it. So by deferring a month or whatever it takes, isn't that a far more appropriate mechanism of dealing with this issue than what is being suggested to plough ahead with the ambush? And I'm sorry, I apologise for using that word, but that's how it feels. There's been very little honesty, integrity in this process.
Point of order.
We need to stop it there, please.
Point of order.
Point of order over here.
Point of order 1.7.2, disorder or language. Just for a member to call in integrity of honesty and integrity of people around this table and staff.
Mayor did that.
Three times.
I said the process. The process. You're going to quote the right words, Councillor.
Order, please. Councillor Watson, would you like to just withdraw that particular part?
Well, I'll repeat what I said, and that was in terms of honesty, integrity in the process. That's what I referred to.
You said the members around here to call themselves honest and integrity.
Order, please.
No.
Order, please.
No.
Order, please.
Okay.
Please. Yeah, the point of order has been raised.
Yeah.
I'm going to allow the member to carry on and just to be very aware of the use of language, please.
I
Okay,
have a
yes.
point of
Now,
order.
the
have a point
points
of
of
order.
order are not for debate. My understanding is points of order are not for debate. The member has raised it. Okay, what is the point of order from the Mayor?
Mr Chair, the point of order is what we discussed in our Code of Conduct. When you talk about an ambush and you say that this paper is not bought with honesty and integrity, that reflects on our staff members. We said before when we did our Code of Conduct we would not tolerate that sort of allegation around this table, and we shouldn't, and the member should be asked to withdraw that comment, please.
So I did ask you, Councillor Watson, to withdraw that comment, and you started by saying that you will repeat what you've said, which is not the best way to respond to me as your chair. I do ask that those words that you uttered are formally withdrawn.
Okay,
please.
well, in the first instance, I was repeating the words the Mayor used, and that was honesty and integrity.
Please, I'll stop again. I'm asking you to withdraw the words that you used.
Well, I will withdraw any inference that was aimed at staff.
I just need a yes.
No.
You are withdrawing the
I'm
words?
withdrawing the inference that the words honesty, integrity or lack of was directed at staff. It was not. Okay? I don't think I can make it any clearer than that. Can I continue, Mr.
Can I have
Chair?
a point of order?
Okay, I'm going to take it that you have withdrawn the words. Is that, you have withdrawn the words? I don't want an explanation, I'm sorry. I just want
think
an
I've
affirmation
given
that you have.
I've given an explanation of the words and the context, and I used it. And if it was taken in respect of staff, that's wrong. It wasn't directed at staff.
Point of order,
Directed at the
Chair.
process.
Point of order. The response here is
Just a minute,
directed at
please. Just a minute,
staff,
please.
very pointedly directed at staff.
I'm just going to hold you, Councillor Henderson. I've got another point of... I've got Councillor Dalton with a point of order.
It's not related. Did you want to go to Councillor Henderson first, or?
Okay, I'm going to come back to you, Councillor Dalton. Councillor Henderson, your point of order, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to seek clarification with that comment that the withdrawal was related to staff, particularly staff, so not relating to us. That still stands on the table, that we are dishonest.
Yes, look, I did ask the councillor to withdraw the words that were critical of the staff. And
Okay, I'll withdraw the words. They weren't critical of the staff, but in order to expedite matters, I'll withdraw the words if that makes everyone happy, so we can get on with the substantial debate,
okay,
Mr. Chair.
the councillor has withdrawn the words. Councillor Dalton, please.
Just want to seek clarification over what we're debating here. So you were clear, you said we're going to debate the deferment and prioritisation and resourcing issues. Councillor Watson is talking about consultation with external stakeholders. Are we talking specifically about the prioritisation and resourcing issues to be resolved? Not consultation with other people.
So I have actually said that twice, and you've picked up on that, and that is what the motion is before us. And so we are to confine our debate to the motion. Can we please proceed confining our debate at this stage to the motion, which is about deferral? I'll go back to Councillor Watson.
Okay, I guess the notion of prioritisation is reflective of also the input of other parties, of how important they see that and what expertise they can bring to it. So if we're talking about prioritisation and cost, for instance, we've had the figure of $1 million bandied around. At the time that those figures were first brought up, I contacted Nelson City Council, who had done a very extensive marina strategy. Just a couple of years earlier, that was 60K. I also consulted with people in Amua who have contacts in international consultants, and their figure that they came up was a third of the cost that was being put out by council at that time. So I just say that in terms of prioritisation and resourcing, part of the reason for deferring is that it gives ability for more accurate information to be brought up in terms of cost, in terms of the input and the priority that other groups that have been engaged in this process would like to bring to the table. But I guess, Mr. Chair, as much as I can talk about prioritisation and resourcing, one of the other ancillary benefits of the deferral as put up in this amendment is that it would allow this substantive report to go through the proper process, to be given the due consideration by audit risk, and more importantly for the councillors sitting around here to be made aware of, because it is a source of contention, members, in terms of this deferral, is that you're making a decision without the full information that is available. And that information in the report, I would suggest, is quite different from the information that we've been given today, and far more telling, and the consequence of over 18 months' work. Don't we owe it to those staff to give them the due consideration of 18 months of work, if we're talking about staff, and indeed the people who have participated in that process, which includes other people in the community and some of the large marina groups. So, in conclusion, I would suggest that if we are to take a truly honest approach here for the best outcome, that we would look to deferral, which will allow these issues to be addressed in the manner they should be, rather than proceed with an item that has been sprung on us at the start of this week without any workshop or without any input or without any consultation. That is simply poor process, and it should be treated accordingly by voting for this deferral. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dalton, your call, please.
Thank you very much. And just talking to the prioritisation and resourcing specifically, I learnt the hard way when I was on the local board that discussions and assumptions don't get a job done. It has to hit the work plan and it has to hit it with the budget. And I lost many priorities as a politician wanting to get through things done by not following that process correctly. Sometimes it hit the work plan and it didn't have a budget for years, but it got to the work plan. This hasn't. We did our priorities on budgets in the LTP. We decided what our priorities were in the LTP, and we voted on that. I voted for a 5% rate increase to ensure that we had resourcing, because I have been consistently concerned about resourcing our team to get the work done. They're getting pummeled with the work coming through from central government. So I voted for 5%. And even that is not enough in terms of what we're faced with now. So we had some pretty rigorous debates and discussions. We have to be disciplined to get through this recovery budget. And that means we don't get distracted. We focus on our priorities, and they are, I'll talk about that in the substantive. So I will not be supporting a deferral while we wait to reprioritise and find resourcing. We've done it. We did it. The next time is the annual plan. I'm surprised to hear there might be an opportunity in the annual plan, because I thought that we were 3 years stuck.
Yeah.
Right. So I won't be supporting this recommendation. I think that we agreed when we went to 5%. Those of us that voted for 5%.
Yeah.
We're agreeing that we needed to put operational money into the organisation to get priorities done, and this was not on the books or in the work plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dalton. And your call now, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. And I won't speak in the substantive if we get to it. So I'll say what I want to say here. Back in March 2019, the report said there was nothing in the budget then, and there's nothing in the budget now. And the next year was an emergency budget, and now in a recovery budget. And that is limited to what's critical and important for Aucklanders. Just as Councillor Dalton said, a marina strategy is not a priority when focusing on recovering from a large financial shock, especially when the major issues of the proposed land sales with marinas have been resolved. We only own 6 out of 15 of the consented marinas, and those are leased out. So even with no ability to really impose any changes anyway, unless there's mutual consent. At present, the planning department is absolutely inundated with mandatory requirements to respond to numerous GPS and national policy statements, and as a result to develop multiple plan changes. And we've heard this before. We've already been advised this is expensive, time consuming, a real stretch on our expert people. And really having that stretch is untenable in the current environment. And these specialists are just not available. They're not even out there. And really our existing staff have too many more important issues to address, like fresh water, housing, climate change, among others. So when I wrote this, near the beginning, it said circa 500 was not requested. Well, it's actually 1 million was not requested in the LTP process, so it's not there to do the work. And I think other people have said what will be deferred. But what I want to offer, possibly, and I won't do it by an amendment, but it's something to think about rather than deferring, is that back in March 2019, the staff presented us with some very sound principles that we could use to guide decisions relating to our marinas, and Councillor Hills did touch on it. These were based on the Auckland Plan, based on consultation, the guiding principles, and then the staff developed those marina principles in light of those things, and they were environmental, cultural heritage, transport and access, opportunities and prosperity, belonging and participation, Māori identity, wellbeing. There was homes and places, and that's one of the contentious ones, but if you look at it, I really support in the most part, those guiding principles. We didn't get to consider them fully because the debate was overtaken by a push for a strategy. We do not need a strategy, but we need to revisit, reconsider and further develop those principles to be relevant now. And it's a lot less resource intensive, as we've heard, and it'll give guidance sooner rather than later, 5 years down the track, if we defer this. And it's about, I think we were told it was 75,000, but say it was 100, 150 instead of $1 million. You know, don't put off this option by deferring about it. Talk about the same old stuff again and again. And I must say, when people are saying that it's a shock, etc., we don't need consultation on this decision. But if we did a group of principles, yes, we could do some consultation on that, and that'd be really useful, and we'd actually have something that guided a lot of what we do earlier. So I would rather go down that track and decide that now, or get that in the work plan now, than waiting 5 years to do a marina strategy, which, you know, the way things are going, we've got so much on our plate that's way more important to probably 1 million more than 1 million more Aucklanders. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper, and I will now go to Councillor Henderson on the amendment.
Thanks, Chair, and I reserve my right to speak on the substantive if we get to that point. First, I want to thank Christine Fletcher for bringing me some biscuits. I definitely needed that, so that's sort of getting us through. That's pretty good. We're happy on this side here. Look, to be frank, so getting to the point, I will not be voting to kick this item down the road to another day. I think that we vote it up or we vote it down now. I think the Mayor has made fantastic points. He's put those thoughts eloquently, and I endorse those thoughts, but I want to add a few points of my own. We've been advised that no further information is needed, and that's why I questioned it, anticipating this debate, and I agree with that advice. I would add, though, that we are salaried contractors here. As councillors, our time isn't free. Our time is money for Auckland residents, and they want us to spend our time wisely. So therefore, I don't want to come back and debate this again with the exact same information that we already have. Deferring this, in my view, is poor governance, pure and simple. As a body, when we defer this, that's poor, and let's instead send the message to Aucklanders that we're a body that gets work done, and it doesn't shy away from making the hard decisions that are in front of us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Simpson, please.
Mr Chair, we live in extraordinary times. You know, we are very short of money, about $1 billion, as we've all known. We've gone through the LTP process and things have been very tough, and they're not going to get any better for at least 3 years. We have stopped a lot of work that we would have done as a result of the financial pressures we're at. The problem I have is that as governors, 17 out of 21 people said we should do a marina strategy. That hasn't happened because of funding. And from where I sit at the moment, I don't think that's going to happen next year or the year after or the year after. In fact, I don't think it really should probably practically be able to occur to the next LTP. My problem, however, is that respectfully, staff have said, overturn the resolutions because we don't have the funding. I can think of other things that's happened. There's lots of other things we haven't done because we haven't got funding. At the risk of someone calling a point of order, I don't think it isn't honest or it lacks integrity to defer this item. Because what we're saying is 17 out of 21 people thought it should happen, and it probably still should happen. And if it's not going to be till the next LTP, I mean, I'm not going to put up another amendment, but that's what I that's what I personally believe is a reasonable time frame for this to be discussed. I think what should happen in supporting the amendment is that the parties involved should potentially get a letter explaining our financial situation, the fact that we cannot do this in the short term, that keeps our integrity, that keeps our honesty, but it doesn't just say, no, we're never going to do it. It'll be very interesting to see what happens in the next 4 years with regards to, and I'll speak to the substantive, some of the other things as comes through with marinas. But I just feel uncomfortable that councillors would resolve something that staff would suggest we do not resolve just because there is not resourcing. I don't think that's right. I would rather leave it on the table, defer it, and my personal view is for it at least until the next LTP, and I think that has honesty and integrity around that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go now to Councillor Walker.
Just want to follow on from Desley. I agree with all of the sentiments that Desley has put, and I think that the nub of this issue is it's a governance issue. If anything, since we made that vote, things have changed. We've had a CCO review that solidified the need for a strategy around marinas, and as the Marina Users Association has said, there are further developments around the occupation licences and the like that have arisen. Let's just remember that in respect of one of the marinas, and that's West Park, the zoning was changed against the Empowering Act from marina land to residential, and then there was a sale that was going through in secret to a developer freeholding that land right along the edge for a whole lot of apartments at a very nominal sum of money. So it's no reason why stakeholders, that includes local boards, iwi, Marina Users Association, really want to have some guidelines around marinas. That's what we're talking about, guidelines. We don't actually have any now. Just going to the matter of cost, myself and Councillor Watson have met with the Chief Executive. The Marina Users Association has put up entirely pragmatic suggestions around things that can happen that go to a marina strategy that don't cost much money. For example, we can make a decision around these marinas, the council-owned ones, being strategic assets because they serve ferries and the like, just like roads are strategic assets. There's hardly any cost attached to that. And that's a work stream that we should be visiting anyway. And I would suggest that there are a number of work streams that go to picking up on a marina strategy that we're going to be doing anyway. So why wouldn't you keep an overarching strategy? I might be a crack record, but I've been campaigning for a water strategy for this council ever since I got elected. I'd raise it at every opportunity. Nobody listened to me, no budget. It took a crisis. Sometimes it takes crises for us to get our act together and recognise that without guiding strategies, and this is what the CCO review indicated, if you don't have the guiding strategies to direct the CCOs, things go amiss. And we know that that has happened. So that's why it's imperative for us to have strategies. I think the point is made around principles. Sure, we could be developing those principles as far as a strategy is concerned. So just coming back to the motion, deferring this until prioritisation and resourcing issues are resolved is entirely pragmatic. It doesn't mean that there isn't work that won't happen anyway in the interim, and maybe there can be some things that are resolved. And I'd like to think that we could have some form of strategy that's shaped up. And as Councillor Watson has mentioned, at least deferring gives an opportunity for audit and risk and the very significant issues raised there to be considered. And at least deferring does mean that stakeholders like iwi, like local boards, like Marina Users Association, of which there are many thousands of members, have some opportunity to engage. So I would urge councillors to go with this. It's a governance issue, and what's wrong with it? What's wrong with deferring until prioritisation and resourcing issues are resolved? And pragmatically, that's what we're doing with everything, aren't we? And if we're doing it with everything, then what's wrong with this? We're constantly prioritising and we're constantly got resourcing issues that are coming to us every day. So entirely pragmatic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Newman, please.
Thank you, Chair. This will be the only time that I speak. But I just want to make some comments that go a little bit wider than the specific amendment. I want to start by, I need to say from the outset that I believe that all people sitting around this table always vote with integrity, and I deeply resent any inference that impugns my honesty and integrity when I cast a vote on any issue. I feel very strongly that some of the inference today has been unwise. Secondly, I think that this amendment is not optimal, because I don't want to Councillor Henderson, I never kick the can down the road. I am more than comfortable to be brave on a vote and in a debate. I think he will appreciate that, most colleagues would. Deferral is not optimal, but the issue is that this does need to be prioritised, this does need to be resourced, because it does carry a mandate. It's an unfunded mandate. And Chair, there's quite a few unfunded mandates in Auckland. Light rail's an unfunded mandate. The Northern Pathway, I suspect, is not sure, that looks like it's a mandate that's about to lose its mandate. I would suggest that ATAP is possibly a rather unfunded mandate at this point. Here's another unfunded mandate. What about the Waterfront Stadium? And remember how much the report cost to produce that document. So you see, members, things do happen around this place, and sometimes it's a surprise. I think that there is a need to work on a funding bid for this particular piece of work. Now, the report that, and I'm not talking to the substantive, and I'm going to finish my comments here, but one of the issues in the report is that it concludes the reasons why these matters, when considered in March 2019, were germane then but no longer relevant now. Well, actually in 2019, I moved the amendment in relation to the empowering legislation because I think that's really important. Chair, you're the Chair of Planning, and I'm assuming that you've read Chapter F of the Unitary Plan. I have too, and in relation to the coastal marina zone, I don't think it's adequate. Councillor Hills, you're right, we don't own all of these particular marinas, but F3.1, the zone description, includes the coastal marina zone for the marinas both council-owned and private. And I think that we need to address some of these matters there, because I want to consider, Chair, and if a marina strategy was to be developed, for example, the prohibited, the permitted and the restricted discretionary activities for the developments in that zone. I think that's really quite important. And I would expect that a marina strategy would be very helpful in shaping the work that Phil Reid and others would have to do in relation to whether we have the criterion set down in the unitary plan fit for purpose. So that's why you would do a piece of work called the marina strategy, in my view. And here's another thing. The challenge that we have is that we are a creature of statute, and in this particular space with respect to marinas, we have empowering legislation. So it's very important to reconcile what we say in the unitary plan against what the empowering acts allow and what they prohibit. And if you're not sure about Parliament being sovereign, we'll reflect on how frustrated some people feel at the moment in relation to the Three Waters reform and the success or otherwise of the advocacy to the government on that. So, Mr. Chair, I would prefer that we, I really don't want to defer it, but I sort of feel that we have to, because there's no other means to be able to get the time to be able to negotiate the funding for this piece of work. So I'm happy to vote for the deferral. Well, I'm not happy about it, but I feel I have no choice. And if that is unsuccessful, well, I don't want to vote to rescind, because ultimately the way to respond with good practice in response to the resolutions of council, whether through the governing body or a committee of the whole, or any standing committee actually, is to respond by giving effect to those resolutions, which is what Mark Maloney has suggested, but we're not going to be doing that in the way of affirming the recommendations, the resolutions from March 2019. We would simply rescind it because the officers conclude that it's not a priority. I think we should respond by prioritising it.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Filipaina, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Jeez.
Dangerous ground, Ol.
Yeah, look,
Better carry on while you're good.
I just put myself off now, so hold on, I'll get back my thoughts. Your Worship, what Councillor Henderson said is exactly my sentiments in regards to what you said when we spoke about the substantive. So I'm going to just refer to and speak on the amendment. I will not be supporting it. I also, and the reason I asked around questions I can ask is that prioritisation and resourcing, I'm hoping it's not going to venture into the space that both Councillor Casey and I have in our work program. I'm hoping it doesn't, because we're looking after that space.
On my phone.
So, can we leave that on so we know what we're talking about? This is like an undercover tapping phone process. So look, for me, I hope that something confirms to me that this is not going to then venture into either the environmental and climate change space, our space with the PACE committee, that the prioritisation and resourcing issues are going to be looking at under the planning committee. So Chair, I will not be supporting this. I find myself in a very awkward position in supporting what Councillor Walker said, and that is things have changed. I agree. This is why we have our staff bringing agenda items to us, because in March 2019, the situation has changed. And it's come back to us today to say it's changed that much that we want to revoke that resolution because it's not a priority and it's because it cannot be resourced. So as good governors, we always have to consider what the staff have given us. And yes, it has changed, but it's just confirmed my vote against the deferral. And hopefully we get to the substantive and this doesn't go through. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Filipaina. And Councillor Kern, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel I should speak to confirm why I'm now going to vote against this amendment, because I did previously indicate that I would support an adjournment of this item, but I think as worded, it doesn't really work or address the issues in terms of resolving resourcing issues, because we haven't heard a way forward for that. And also, I've been listening very closely to all of the debate. It's been interesting, and although I do feel like it is a bit of a big distraction when we have a big meaty item that we need to get to on this agenda. But I'm not convinced that a marina strategy, even if we had the budget, is the right approach, and that's the advice that we should be listening to. So I do appreciate that there are councillors who've been trying to progress this for a long time, but I do have to question, if the approach you're taking hasn't worked over a decade, then perhaps it needs to be looked at and to take a new approach rather than just doing the same thing over and over. So I don't feel that I can support deferring it, because I do just think it's kicking it to touch in a way that isn't going to get us any further in the debate, and we will just be back around this table having the same discussion. So I know that might be kind of bittersweet for some councillors that this is not going to address it, but I think from what I've heard that we should just bite the bullet now with what's recommended to us. So I'm happy to support the
substantive recommendation. And I did just want to also flag, in listening to everybody's comments, that I thought what Councillor Cooper suggested and was also recommended in terms of taking, if we're not going to do a strategy, there still needs to be a framework or principles. And of course, we're going to do bodies of work that look at marinas in the future, but that can be approached in different ways. And I think the big one is around the Resource Management Act and what we actually do in our coastal environment, and that we should never be consenting again marinas like Kennedy Point. That is not how we should be using our coastal environment, and we shouldn't be giving it the commons away for free as well. And those are the big issues that we need to address. So that's why I feel like I needed to speak, just to confirm that I won't be supporting this amendment, and I don't need to speak to the substantive item. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor, and I'll now go to Councillor Young, please.
Me?
Okay.
First of all, no money, no talk. And I do listen everybody. I appreciate that. We are the team, even we have a different view. But I was thinking everybody speak, I all agree, but very hard to make a decision. So I think all good. But it's very hard to make a decision. But I just thinking the Eastern Busway defer for another 2 years and $120 million. And we should probably can try to find out the $500,000 or $1 million and to do this one. But even if the result is not passed, I think we still have a responsibility to make the strategy keep going. As the Councillor John Wilson just mentioned, the other council can make $65,000. We should check with them. They might be can get a better solution to sort it out. But I appreciate everybody's points. And next few seconds, make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Chair. My comments will be short. I wanted to say thank you to everyone. I've been quiet on this debate. I've been listening attentively, and I've really appreciated it. I know there's, we go in highs and lows, and there are some challenges along the way, but I think robust discussion is really important. I might disappoint a few, but I'm going to support this motion. And I just wanted and I've been hearing expressions have caught my ear, and probably these aren't substantive issues, so you might think, well, you don't have to listen to the rest of what I've got to say then. But I'm interested in this notion of kicking things to touch. You know what happens when we kick the ball out to touch? We reset. And if there's still time, the line out goes. And if I could use an NRL analogy if you want, because you could also talk about the back line and what happens there, and either the reset from underneath the post or at the 22. But I think this gives us an opportunity for this short period of time, and the sense that I got listening to Councillor Watson was that it wouldn't be for ages. This isn't going to go down some road, the can down some road that's going to be 58 years. I know I've heard what Councillor Desley said about possibly being LTP being the next true opportunity for this to be considered at a financial perspective. But for that reason, I've enjoyed the debate. I just make one closing comment and with regard to something else, but relates to this. I made last week some scathing comments about the mass vaccination event that happened in Manukau last weekend. And it wasn't in direct relation to that event. It was about the way in which we've reached particular communities about it. One of the questions I got asked on radio was, well, have you contacted the person? Have you told them how you feel? Because on Twitter they were going, oh, Fessel should just shut up. He should shut the F up, is what they were saying to me on Twitter. And I said, yes, I actually have. I have made contact with them. In fact, I've made the humble request to be involved, get the community involved in the say. And from what I've been hearing, I was really concerned to hear the Chief of Strategy say that that they've been it felt like there's been forceful, ongoing conversations that haven't been helpful. That's what I heard. And I wonder if this might also give us the opportunity to reset, to line up the line out, to actually respectfully meet with people and just go through this conversation again. So that's why I'll be supporting this motion the same way I'm supporting the ADHB and helping them to understand that certain communities don't just all rush off to Manukau to get a vaccination. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, that completes the speaking turn. Just to be clear, Councillor Hills. Okay, I don't have you. Councillor Hills?
Yeah, kia ora. I won't be supporting this, and I think the shame of it is that the original motions that I supported back in March 2019 would have endorsed an approach of doing a principles review and an inclusive process involving all marina users and wider communities and mana whenua on the areas that we have responsibility for and that could make a difference. And that included the most controversial issues at the time, which were Gulf Harbour, West Park and Half Moon Bay. And those issues would have been done. That would have been done that year. That would have been done before COVID. That would have given us the reasons and the answers to some or what we needed. The reason why I voted that way and then subsequently against the motion after that one was lost was because the advice was that we could not compel all the marinas to be involved and we could not compel the effect that we were talking about at the time. And we also said there was no budget for it. And the A here says deferred until prioritisation and resourcing issues can be resolved. We're having a similar issue we discussed yesterday over, or the day before, over the trees. We keep putting open-ended resolutions on the table when resources allow, when things happen. And so the community hold on to things and think we are working on things when we cannot do that. I'm aware that our planning team put up quite a considerable budget bid and did not, because of all the MPS work and because of all the added things the government was loading on us and all the things that we are loading on those teams, they've got fewer staff. You know, we had to reduce our headcount by 1,000 last year. I get emails and calls and things about issues at 11 p.m, at 10 p.m, in weekends, talking to staff member yesterday who's working every night of the week to get the stuff we keep loading on them. And the issue is this is another open-ended when something might happen at some point in the future. So I personally think that it doesn't actually resolve the issues. What would have resolved the issues is if we supported that original motion based on staff advice back in March 2019. And once again, I'm worried that we're going to ignore staff advice and they have to go back to their teams and go, hey guys, I think we're thinking about doing this at some point, but we still don't have the money. The reason why we are nothing like Nelson is the Nelson was on one marina and it was about them taking back ownership of that marina and removing the leasee. This is about 14 marinas. Also, the Nelson one did not engage with mana whenua. That is quite a important process that we must do, and it is
point of order. So sorry to interrupt, Councillor Hills, but
no, I need to know what this point of order is. It can't be just a counterpoint.
no, it's not. It's not a
point of
counter.
order.
It's a matter of fact related to the wording in the resolutions. The resolutions prioritise the council-owned marinas only, not the other marinas.
Okay.
So I think that's important.
It's not a point of order, though. It's not. And I appreciate, you know, we all hear things that we don't like and we want to say something, but we can't say something because we've got standing orders to abide by. I'll go back to Councillor Hills.
So I'll just finish up there that, yeah, I don't think this, the amendment actually does what we think it might do. It will just mean that we've got another thing hanging on to and then we're loading on our staff without putting a budget bid up. And like the discussion on trees and notable trees yesterday, that's another $1 million that we are hoping we could find from planning budgets that we don't have. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And look, I won't be supporting this, so I don't want to present any great long-winded speech here on why I'm opposing the deferral. What you are voting on, members, is you are deferring the item. The item is item 11, and if it was deferred, the very same report and the very same recommendations would come back in front of this committee. I hope you're clear on that. It is deferring the item. Item 11 is the item, and item 11 is a report and the same set of recommendations. You would get everything that you see before you on this report coming back at you at a future time if this motion passed. I will now pass
For
to the
division.
vote. And Councillor Watson's called the division.
So this is a division on the amendment, which is on the screen, that the item be deferred. Councillor Darby.
No.
Councillor Casey.
No.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore. Sorry, we'll have to come back. Councillor Collins.
Full.
Councillor Coombe.
No.
Councillor Cooper.
Against.
Councillor Dalton.
Against.
Councillor Filipino.
No.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Mayor Goff.
Against.
Member Henare.
No.
Councillor Henderson.
Against.
Councillor Hills.
No, sorry.
Councillor Mulholland.
Against.
Councillor Newman. Councillor Sayers.
Or
Councillor Simpson. Councillor Stewart. Councillor Walker. Councillor Watson. Councillor Young.
You've got to just check this, Councillor Cashmore there.
Councillor Cashmore, are you on the line? He's having some connection issues, so I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay.
No, don't put him in as anything. Just put him as an absent. Absent? Then show the numbers at the bottom. The motion is lost. Yeah.
Okay, I have, the motion was lost by 9 votes to 11. So we now go to the substantive motion. And that's before us here now. Now, are there further, I need to just, following the standing orders, are there further speakers on these motions before us? Okay, I do. I'm going to take Councillor Hills, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Filipino, was it? Aye, and then Councillor Mulholland.
Yeah.
And I'll start with Councillor Hills, please.
It was just a quick comment. Just because the AMUA information was tabled, there's an accusation, or there's a comment in there that if I support the proposed development at Bayswater Marina, there's a belief that I would have a conflict of interest if I support the recommendations. Just to clarify, decisions of the Bayswater Marina and housing there happened well before I was even elected, and I have had no communications with the Bayswater Marina, and AMUA have not contacted me about that issue, so I don't know where that came from, but just clarifying that I'll be supporting the motions and that I have a right to vote and no conflict. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of quick points. Just to remind colleagues that we were advised by the department that if they had an extra $1 million, they wouldn't spend it on this in the first place. We need our brightest minds working on things like the MPS, which will shape our communities for decades to come. And I note that we're 3:29 p.m. and we haven't even got to that yet, so it could be a very long night, Chair. Just briefly, one more point is that, look, I voted for a 5% rates as well. I want to total call what Councillor Dalton said about that. A majority of my community wanted me to do that, but there was plenty of pressure for me to not do that. And I did that because we've got a hell of a lot of work to do. There were some that would respond to this debate by prioritising and funding the work, and that's all well and good, but I would ask them, where is the money coming from? I would say that even at 5%, and respectfully, not everyone here supported that either, we could not fund it. So there is the facts. Where is the money? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'll now go to Councillor Filipino.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm not going to go over what the points that His Worship the Mayor and other speakers had made prior to the amendment. However, Councillor Collins, I just love the way you speak, and the fact that you mentioned kicking the ball to touch. I had the vision in my head around Kelly Brazier when she cooked the ball to the touch, because when she did, the game was over. You know, the ladies won gold, and that was the first thing that came to mind. And you know, never mind the line out, it was gold. And yeah, you know, and that why it was just so great. And so thank you for that, Councillor Collins. I do, however, want to acknowledge the staff, and I want to acknowledge the staff. The reason, in particular, because the same two names on the report in March of 2019 are the same two staff members who are presenting it to us now. Jacques and Megan were there. Megan, I want to take my hat off to you, because what you shared to us was insightful, and no way at all am I implying anything else apart from the people who had approached you. They were advocating for the marinas that they know and the community that they represent. But, you know, it was just how, and I think the comment that you made, and that sort of left me thinking and sort of making my decision around supporting the substantive is, look, this is a reality at what's going on. And it is reality from your perspective and the staff's perspective. So I acknowledge you and the staff in regards to what I know is something that, well, we've been sitting here for the last few hours. So I just want to acknowledge you, Megan, and to Jacques and to the team. So, Chair, I will be supporting this, as I did in 2017, based on supporting the staff who have done the reporting to us and have given us their expert advice. And that is who I will be supporting here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mulholland, please.
Thanks, Chair, because I did actually have my name up before, so I'll speak to that. I want to firstly apologise to everyone that I wasn't here in March 2019 when that decision was made. But if I was, I tell you what I would have said is that it is Auckland Council assets and we shouldn't be spending funding on others, whilst we should take an overview and a strategic approach to how we look at this city and how we move forward. My thoughts are that I would be requesting a financial contribution from those who have private marinas. So that's how I saw that. I too have, you know, moved, and as I say, Chair, I will still tell you I do have sweaty palms. It isn't pretty, but I still do because of these tough decisions, and I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this conversation and debate. I do think that Councillor Young, I want to appreciate and acknowledge what you shared. It is very difficult, so I tutoko that and I am with you on that. Councillor Cooper commented with regards to framework and a plan. I would much rather see that process proceed. So we do have fiscal restraints, and anyone that knows me will know I did not agree with 5% in the rates rise, but I did it for the purpose that we are in the situation we are in. And that I also had sweaty palms for about 2 weeks over. And, you know, I did it for the best that I could for the people of Tamaki Makaurau. So on the basis of the information I've heard and what I have seen, I would rather have seen a framework. And as I say, sincere apologies again that I wasn't here, but hopefully I'll be here next time for a vote. Kia ora. Thanks, Chair, for your work on this too and the staff.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dalton.
Thank you. Look, I just want to start off also by thanking Megan for your honesty today, vulnerability even, and you certainly took some hard questions, and it's difficult. It's evidence there's a lot of pressure there. This is unique for you. You haven't done this before. You haven't revoked a resolution. You have done that because there's a lot of pressure around people coming to you, even though it's not in the work plan or funded, asking you to get it done. It's unfair. And so if this is one way, I'm sorry that this is the way that you've had to be able to ease some pressure from you and your team. So thank you for that. For me, it does come down to priorities. Or one, it is about supporting our staff. We've talked about this a lot. since I've been elected to council, we've talked a lot about making sure that we care for our people and that we do the right thing by them. And this was a request, and I respect that, and I respect you and your team. Our priorities, we've agreed our priorities, I've said this already. We are here at the moment to enable housing through consenting and planning and partnerships. We're here to reduce the DSI on the roads. We're here to reduce emissions for climate change through Auckland Transport. We're here to provide jobs through the CRL and the Central Interceptor and the other capital projects that we agreed to fund through the long-term plan. And now, submission after submission that is impacting on Megan's team from central government, they're piling through. I'm only reading them, and it's a hell of a lot of work to understand it all and see where it all fits. To actually have to turn something around in that short time must be immensely difficult and provide a lot of pressure. I was on the local government, New Zealand Government Strategic Advisory Group Skype on Monday, listening to all of the advice being provided on the MBA, and then reading our one and just seeing, you know, where the differences are or not. And can't even imagine it's a difficult job in that operational space. So I understand that, and I'm only too pleased to be able to support this recommendation at this point in time, to be able to at least relieve one pressure from you when we've got so many other priorities. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor, and I'll now go to Councillor Watson again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the most disappointing aspect of this afternoon from my perspective is that members have been told on numerous occasions that there is this very comprehensive report going to Audit and Risk in a couple of weeks' time, that by approving this resolution, members have essentially chosen to discount that as being relevant, despite the fact that you've had various sections of it quoted to you that show that it is relevant. So that's incredibly disappointing that a decision of this magnitude would be made in that sort of vacuum. I guess secondly, again, if we come back to the to the word of honesty and public credibility that have been bandied around, I think people are going to be a little bit disappointed if they think this vote today is going to result in a greater degree of credibility with the people who have engaged in this. Quite the opposite. They're going to be very disappointed, and as I said, they are far and wide in terms of their membership, and no doubt they'll make their views known to elected members as a consequence. In terms of the resolutions that are being revoked, I just wanted to reiterate the point I attempted to make earlier, was that this region-wide strategy was going to prioritise the council-owned marinas. They're ones we have a direct influence in. Nelson did a very comprehensive, incredibly comprehensive marina strategy. Yes, sure, 60-odd pages covering every aspect from marine, commercial, entertainment, accommodation, dredging, you name it, they covered it off. 60 grand, 4 times 60 is 240. We had quotes from people within the Amoa organisation who were very confident that such a strategy could have been done for under $250,000 at the cheapest, and 350 at the top end. That also doesn't appear to be have been factored. And I guess if we're talking about strategies and costs and reports, we should maybe have gone to the Mayor, because he certainly managed to get a $1 million report that didn't see the light of day done, and didn't come through any bid as far as I'm aware. So maybe, Phil, you can give us advice sometime as how you managed to pull that one off. Finally, point B, commence the strategy with stakeholder and mana whenua and matawaka engagement. That process, as Councillor Walker referred to, could have rolled out at virtually next to no cost. So there's expertise there in terms of initial engagement, could have gone over the next couple of years without any cost to council, at which point we might have been in a position to actually implement a strategy as such. So that's a false argument putting up that this money had to be here and now. It didn't. The Amoa indicated on a number of occasions in that second part of the resolution could have continued with minimal, if any, cost, and they were happy to facilitate that. that offer wasn't taken up. So I guess, ladies and gentlemen, when we come to it, despite the kind of the collection of casuistic comments in terms of justification, it is a disappointing day for Auckland's communities, marina communities, and that's not just the berth holders, that's the wider people that use these communities, the communities that are adjacent to these marinas that use them for all manner of things. We had an opportunity, if we're talking about priorities, I would have thought transport hubs, as a lot of the marinas are, open space, as a lot of the marinas are, boat launching facilities, as a lot of the marinas are. I would have thought that was a reasonable priority going forward for this limited and precious resource. Apparently not. So for those people who did support that little bit of scrutiny that was going to occur by waiting a week and a half, thank you very much. For those who didn't, you've got your own reasons for that. But I would suggest that if you think that's the end of it today, you might be in for an unpleasant surprise as far as our wider community go, because they're going to be very disappointed at proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson, your call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I listened to Councillor Dalton and I agreed with everything she said, but I'm going to vote against A. And I just don't feel comfortable overriding a decision that the governors make by staff because there's not the resource or funding. I do not prioritise this for anything in the immediate future. I really, funnily enough, I don't. I think it needs a bit of time. I don't think we've got the funding. But there's just something intrinsically wrong for me when governors make a resolution that's overridden just because of the lack of resource. So I'm happy to leave A, noting that it would be held over there. My personal preference, as I've said, address it next term in the LTP when I know that actually there is some money. I do believe we've got other priorities. Yes, I voted for the 5%. Yes, I voted for priorities that go with that and the projects that go with that. But I'm just uncomfortable about the way this has gone ahead. But Megan, thank you. And I know this is your way of doing it. I really appreciate that. But this is my personal view.
Thank you. And Councillor Cooper, you're speaking to? No? Oh, okay. Thank you.
I think, can I just finish my, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I thought
I think
you
it's
had.
just very sad that the City of Sales doesn't have a marina strategy.
And Councillor Walker.
Sure. So first off, Mr. Chair, I'd just make a request because like Councillor Simpson, I don't want to vote for A. That's revoking the marina strategy. And I'd like my vote on that recorded separately, so I would make the request that you put the vote for A separately, please. Just in speaking to this motion, I echo the disappointment on the part of Councillor Watson and the sadness on the part of Councillor Simpson. I've certainly followed this issue for some time, and I'm mindful of the many thousands of Aucklanders that AMUA, the Marina Users Association, effectively represent, and the significant communities that are clustered around these marinas that have been absolutely shocked with the way Council has handled issues around the marinas. And I'm sure that there will be that you're quite happy to chime in there, Councillor Simpson, quite happy about that.
Carry on, Councillor.
So what really concerns me, and I just ask the question of myself, what do groups in the community have to do to actually engage and affect results? Because the Auckland Marina Users Association, in my opinion, have been treated almost dismissively. They've tried to meet with the chief executive. They've put up incredibly pragmatic solutions dealing with costs and process and the like. I've certainly done that together with my fellow councillor, Councillor Watson, around this issue. And we've literally got nowhere. And that's not because we and they haven't put effort in and they've gone through the processes I mentioned before. They've made approaches through the annual plan and the long-term plan process, but they just get stymied. So you've got to ask yourself questions around just what's going on. And certainly it just reinforces time and time again, in my opinion, a lack of confidence in governance issues around the city as it goes to issues that some people regard as really important. And for some people, not everyone, but for some people, people that know about these marina issues and engage with them, this is a really important issue. It might not be an issue for many people, but it is for them, and we're not listening to them. And as Councillor Watson said, these issues aren't going to go away. We're not putting any principles or strategy in place, apparently, even simplistically, to deal with this. We're not implementing the CCO review that targeted this. And we're voting something through that is effectively dismissive of the report that's going to audit and risk. It's actually shocking in terms of process. You know, if an outsider were looking at this, they'd say to themselves, what's going on here? Which is what I ask myself on an ongoing basis. So again, I'm very disappointed. I want to vote against A, and I'll vote for the balance because that's a fallback. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there other speakers? There being none. Oh.
I'm not allowed to, because I think we've been put on standing orders. But if you could indulge me,
I'll just check what the standing orders allow. I need to go by the standing orders, Councillor.
So it's been a well-established practice amongst the governing body and its committees that if you moved an amendment, you are taken as having spoken to the substantive motion.
I'll move A by division, Mr Chair, in light of that.
Okay, I've got a request for taking A by division, and I will now pass to the governance advisor to take the vote.
Okay, so the division has been called on clause A of the motion, which is on the screen in front of you. For the benefit of those online, that is the revocation of the previous resolution. Okay, Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Yes.
Councillor Collins.
Against.
Councillor Coombe.
Aye.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Dalton.
For.
Councillor Filipina.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher. No. Mayor Goff.
For.
Member Henare.
Yep.
Councillor Henderson.
For.
Councillor Hills.
For.
Councillor Mulholland.
For.
Councillor Newman.
No.
Councillor Sayers.
Against.
Councillor Simpson. Councillor Stewart. Councillor Walker. Councillor Watson.
Yes.
Councillor Young. Sorry, no, okay. Motion's carried by 12.
So that motion is carried by 12 votes to 9. We will now take it on voices on the motions before us, which is B, C, D. That's the conclusion.
Yes.
B, C, and D. Take those on voices. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. Declare that carried. Was that unanimous on that? I think it was. We'll record it accordingly. Unanimous on BCD.
Point of order.
Mayor Goff.
Mr Chair, during my comments when I spoke, I talked about there being more honesty and integrity in removing the motion than leaving it there. Clearly from the comments of some of my colleagues, they felt that was directed at them personally. I want to assure them that it was not directed at any councillor personally or any group of councillors, and if you took offence at that, I unreservedly apologise for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
And by the way, we won a gold with Lisa Carrington, which I think Councillor Simpson was trying to interject in an inappropriate time. But
bronze in the shot put as well.
I think we'll.
Tom Walsh, bronze.
Great.
We'll can I move an extension of meeting time until the close of business? Councillor Mulholland will move and Councillor Filipaina will second. Thank you. We've got a few items to go, members, but we do need a break. Let's take a 10-minute adjournment and we'll be back at...
We'll be back at 4 p.m.
4 p.m, please. Stand adjourned.
Oh, that's right.